Hi, Rico.
Hey, how you doing? Great. So let's see. Let's start from the beginning. All right. What got you into and decided you to, start a coffee company? I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah, my husband and I are both big coffee drinkers.
Mhm.
And a few years ago, we were just curious to understand how coffee is roasted and this concept of micro roasting. And one of the things that we have not liked about coffee and have not been able to find is a coffee that wasn't bitter. Whether it's dark or a medium or a light, you can get that bitter and acidic flavor.
Mhm.
And we decided that we want to see how could you make a coffee that's not bitter? We were connected to a coffee roaster, Ken, who now is our partner, and he's been doing this for 25 years. He was working, a corporate job, decided he had roasted beans on the side as a hobby, and decided 25 years ago he wanted to really focus on that and make it his life's work at the end of the day. So Ken brings this art and science to the table from a roasting perspective. When we talked to him, there was a lot of discussion, and we said, we obviously aren't roasters, but we love coffee. My husband and I are both in business and marketing. And we said, what if we were to create a brand that first started online? That was our initial goal. And then started to branch out. And Ken at the time was saying, I've been doing this for 25 years. The business side doesn't actually interest me as much as the roasting that I love. So what if we were to do something together and come up with roasts and blends that achieve what you're looking for? And honestly, the rest is history, which has been amazing. And we are based out of Newport, Rhode Island, and everything to our brand has a nautical vibe. And even the way that we create the roasts are inspired by the ocean or nautical components that help us really achieve our idea of roasts as bold as the ocean. Micro roasting is really, and for us, what that means is that we roast no more than 45 pounds at a time. That allows us to control the heat and the temperature that the beans are exposed to, which then empowers us to really control the flavor profiles that you get from the beans. Because we are doing such small batch roasting, that gives us the control. Many other bigger companies roast hundreds, if not thousands of pounds at the same time. So you can imagine the control is just less. And that's why you tend with our beans, because of the roasting process, we can control the bitterness, we can control the acidity in a much greater level than a bigger roaster. And you're seeing now, micro roasting is almost becoming, if you think of craft beers and even wine, people were specializing into these micro craft beers.
Mhm.
Now, micro roasting is becoming its kind of new wave of coffee roasting. One of the things that Ken prides himself upon, our master roaster, is his ability to, because he's been doing this for so long, to sense he can tell from the crackling of the beans if they're done. And we're talking about temperatures that are hundreds of degrees that are roasting these beans. So seconds and definitely minutes count in this process. So you can go from having a great batch to, if you go a little bit too long, that can be completely ruined.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. It's kind of funny because I heard a story a while back about how Guinness beer became Guinness beer. And the way it became Guinness beer is the guy burnt the barley and everything. And he was so embarrassed because there was so much of it that he just decided that he was going to ship it anyways and hope that nobody noticed it. And what happened in that particular case was that all the places that they shipped it, you said, hey, where did that beer come from? Can you get us more? Of course, roasting coffee, sourcing coffee, all of those things, it's like any other food product. One of the things I learned, you have to take care of the food product. You have to get good product. Don't fuck it up, as the chef told me when I was working in the kitchen, and, honor it and take care of it and do it justice, and it will give you a great product. And it sounds like that's exactly what you guys are doing.
We believe absolutely in that. And there's something about the care into the beans and without trying to sound corny, it is true that every batch is really, there's so much care and thought put into it. And that's what I think you get when you taste the coffee. Another piece that's really important to our process, we call it community roasting, where because Ken's been doing this for so long and because we're really trying to make sure we're giving our customers what they want, we highly encourage feedback. What do you like? What do you not like? And then we try to tweak and kind of make sure that we're constantly improving. And that's been really exciting. And the community that has started to be built around Springline Coffee has, first of all, they're not shy, which is great because that helps us get better. And they recognize that we listen, we take action, and we try to make improvements where we can, or if something's working really well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Right.
So that's been a really fun part. And I think that comes into the care and the ability to take the time to do that. Another piece that comes into micro roasting is being really thoughtful about where you source your beans from. That's a fun process that Ken really owns as our master roaster, because for him, it's about knowing the people that you're getting the beans from, building those relationships. And because he's been doing this for 25 years, he has these long-lasting relationships, which has, quite frankly, made it a little bit easier for us to source the right beans. So he has been to the farms, he's met with the farm owners, and then we really do source from around the world. In fact, there's one roast that we have called Smooth Seas, which is, it has an Indian monsoon roast that we call it. And the beans, actually, because of the monsoon winds, it actually treats the beans a little bit differently than other beans are grown. And because that monsoon wind is coming through, it actually makes the bean the least acidic of any bean that we have. Wow. And it creates this very mild, smooth, it's one of our lighter roasts, and people love it. And that came because Ken was able to talk to the farmers to understand what is different about these beans. And, it's funny, I always say, like, a monsoon, you don't think of it as being, we call it smooth seas. You think of it being very rocky, but the winds and what it's pulling through the air really treat that bean differently. And you can taste that difference. It's pretty amazing. So we are very clear on the sourcing. We are trying to work with small farms that allow us to hopefully be more ethical in our purchasing, as well as giving us unique capabilities to source different types of beans. And the other part to micro roasting that I should note is one of the things we are always proud of is how quickly you get the coffee from the time that it's roasted. Because we're doing smaller batches, we really do focus on getting the coffee to you within days of the roasting process. So it's the ultimate freshness. Whereas if you're buying things off the shelf, likely they have sat for 3, 6, maybe even longer months. When you try a micro roast and a really fresh coffee versus one that's been on the shelf, you can taste the difference. You can smell the difference. It's really a different experience.
And where else are you sourced? Because I know you also source from Central America, South America as well?
Yeah, we have
Africa?
Yep, absolutely. Colombia, Ecuador, Costa Rica, and really across South and Central America. That's where some of the greatest beans are grown.
Right.
It's really across the board. We probably source from about Tanzania and a few other places as well.
Now, and have you guys been to all these places? Has Ken? I mean, is it a mixture?
Yeah, I wish I could say that I have been to all the places. That is definitely the goal. Ken has been able to visit many of them, and then also that has been connected to other farmers because they'll say, oh, you should try, this Costa Rican farmer. And then that's how he kind of meets them and gets to experience it. Absolutely. And every order that we get comes with certificates to kind of authorize that it is actually from this farm, which is what the farms do to make sure they're certified. It's organic. We have shade grown coffees. There's all sorts of different types of coffees that are certified. So then that's how we continue to ensure, and also from an ethical perspective, the source
Mhm.
the labor laws, and whatever else. So that all comes with every farm agreement that we have. What I can tell you is that there are so many different ways, and because of how coffee is grown, the elevation also plays into that. So you can have high elevation or low elevation coffees, and the flavor profiles can shift from that. But if, depending on the weather, or, I think right now, for example, I want to say it's Ecuador, we are seeing a bit of a shortage because of some challenges with the weather. So everything is impacted by the seasons, the amount of rain, if it's a drought or if it's a washout, that really impacts. And then you can even have, like I was mentioning before, there's shade grown.
Right.
There's lots of different type of beans in the way that they're grown. And throughout these different regions, that allows you to kind of source at different times of the year as well. We use Arabica beans, which are more of the premium type of bean.
Mhm.
And we use a bit of Robusta actually in our espresso. That's kind of one of our, Ken will probably kill me, one of our secret ingredients in our espresso. We have a 5-bean espresso that is off the charts, amazing.
Oh, wow.
And he adds a little Robusta to it to give it a little bit more depth. But yeah, so we use all Arabica beans. Oh, they can vary for sure. I mean, some of them are hundreds of acres. Many of them are hundreds of acres. Even the small farms are quite large because there's so much land available to the industry for this. So they can really range from hundreds to thousands of acres. Let me go back to when we first started. We knew we wanted to have obviously a light, a medium, a dark, and an espresso.
Mhm.
That was our starting point. That was as much as Joe and I could bring to the table. And Ken had a lot of ideas as well. I mean, he's always thinking. He's kind of a tinkerer. Like, let me try something else. Let me try, he's working on like wood roasted beans, and he's working on other types of air roasted, lots of interesting concepts. So we had to start to map out what are all the opportunities and where are the places where we think the flavor profiles can be the best. It was a lot of testing because, you try something or that doesn't really work as well, but what if we switch one thing? And that's where Ken's expertise honestly came into to be just so valuable to us as a team, because we would say, this one, we're getting a bit of bitterness or we're not getting the right flavor profile, something's off. We're back at it, starting a new roast and trying to see what we can do there. Let me adjust the temperature. Let me adjust the amount of beans I'm putting in the roaster. So that's really been a lot of the process. That's what took the longest, really. And getting our friends and family to try it. What do you think of this one? And taking that feedback and then kind of iterating, I should say.
Right.
We started with one of the ideas that Ken had that he wanted to try was, what if we mixed a light roast and dark roast to get to a medium roast? And that's what we call our dark and bright. And that has actually become one of my favorite beans, because we take our lightest roast, the Indian Malabar Monsoon that I was talking about, our smooth seeds, and we take one of our darkest roasts and we blend that together. So you open that bag, one, it's beautiful because you have 2 different color beans. But more importantly, the flavor is you're getting the best of both worlds.
Oh, wow.
So it's been a lot of just, hey, what if we did this? Or things that Ken's been wanting to try for a while. We really do get the benefit of his experience. And then, so we'll come up with what that roast is. We try to think about, what's in the naming process is fun. That's where I love it the most, because we want to have a nautical vibe to almost everything that we do.
Right.
To stay true to our brand. And that's been a really fun experience to think through, like, okay, what could be, we came out a few months ago with an ultra dark roast. That one we called Dark Horizon. And that's been an exciting process to get to name them and then think about, how do we bring them to market? How do we help people correlate the name and what they're going to get in the roast? So, and then creating the tasting notes as well. We really are roasting basically 45 pounds or less at a time. It's tougher to roast like 5 pounds and say, let's see if we can get the same flavor, because it is about the mass that's in there as well. So that's been one thing of, you know, you go through a lot of coffee, but it's worth it in the end. So that's kind of how our process goes. We tend to do a bit of a smaller batch, but we can't really get, because the machines that we have, we can't really do like, let's just try a pound. You got to do a little bit more than that just to make sure we're accounting for all the factors that a bigger batch of 45 pounds would need to account for.
Now, at what point does the blending happen? Are you roasting all the beans individually? Are you roasting them together? How does that all work?
Yeah, so that is individually, and then we put them together. So for the dark and bright, we take the dark roasted beans and the light roasted beans, and then put them in for a shorter roast, very quick, but to kind of get them together and get them to the final stage. And then we package that together.
Got it. Okay. So you roast each separately, and then you just kind of throw them in the pan together, mix them, reheat them a little, get a little blended. Yeah. And okay.
In that one, in some of our other roasts, and we have what's called a Springline signature, which is one of our most popular. Mm-hmm. We have a couple different roasts in there, but we're doing that all at the same time. So it really depends, and based on how you do that, you get a different flavor profile.
Sure. Okay, so some of them are actually roasted all together, and others are roasted separate. Okay. Oh wow.
Exactly. Yeah, it depends on the blend. So we have roasters, we have a few of them. And like I mentioned, they are about 50. They can probably do a little bit more. We tend to keep 45 pounds at a time or less. And really it is about that roasting machine is so important, because it's all about the heat and the distribution of the heat. I wish I had something with me to show you, but it's, assume a big pan, and let's just say you're putting 45 pounds of coffee in there, and it's roasting through. There's a flame, it's propane powered, and there's a massive fan, because the one thing that happens is that these beans are being roasted at such a high temperature. We're talking 300, 400, 500 degrees.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if that fan, and actually one of the challenges that we constantly need to be watching out for is that these beans can combust and really go up in flames very quickly. So that fan is critical to making sure that the heat is kind of pulled through, and it's also kind of cooling them at the same time, because that's one of the most dangerous parts of the roasting process. Not to make it sound over dramatic, but it truly is. Those can catch on fire at any point. And it's about making sure that, one, you know exactly what to do when that happens. Right. And two, that you're watching it so closely to make sure that that doesn't happen. Of course, sometimes it does. But that's the level of heat that we're talking about. Wow. So it's fascinating. And, it's also the beans release a lot of gases as well. So that's another piece that needs to be considered in the whole process. How much do you want to release? How high is the heat going to allow that gas to release? So that's why sometimes actually on the bags, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little vent.
Oh yeah.
Right here. It's blended in on ours, but sometimes you can see it more clearly on the bags. But part of that is to allow the gas to continue to release, because once it's been roasted, it can still be releasing. So usually we let it sit for a day or two to let that process naturally continue. And then if you didn't have this valve, the bags can kind of explode, because there's so much air and pressure in there from the gas being released that it can pop. So this is part of our process, and this is honestly what really helps make sure we're getting that bitterness out of there. So Ken will do a roast, and then we'll let that sit for a little bit, do a second roast, probably not as long, usually a little bit quicker, maybe a little bit of a lesser temperature. Depends on the flavor that we're trying to get in the roast. But that's part of what Ken believes is the key to success for our roasting. That's why when you do taste our beans and when you brew the coffee, you're getting a bold flavor without any of that bitterness,
Right.
with that acidity, because that second roast helps solidify that. I think at the end of the day, it's personal preference. For us, our bar is bold, no bitterness, and low acidity overall. And a coffee that, as coffee purists, a coffee you drink black, you don't need anything to add to it. That to us is always the achievement of a good roast. But, everybody's flavor palette and preference is different. So what we, think about how many people drink large produced coffees that you can get at a drive-through, right? And they love it. It's just that's their flavor profile and preference. I think it's as you start to become more accustomed to the beans and to what can happen when you have a really bold roast that's really micro roast, you taste a completely different coffee. And that's what, for us, is a good roast. A couple things for sure. One is we always suggest looking at the roast date. That's really important. The closer that you can get to that roast date, really the better. Because you're going to get the freshest coffee always tastes the best. We strongly recommend that if you can and you have a grinder at your house, that you get whole bean, because that allows it, one, to stay fresher longer, and two, as you grind it, that you're getting the freshest grind. When it's ground and you buy ground, which is totally understandable because a lot of people don't have grinders, that is just, the freshness goes a little bit faster. So the shelf life takes a little longer. So if you can do whole bean, if you can look at the roasted date, which if they don't have a roasted date, that's usually a sign of a problem in our mind. And then you should really look at where the beans are sourced from and making sure that that is done in an appropriate way. Right. And I think, to be honest, all the micro roasters, that's part of the pride that everybody has, is how they source the beans and where they're from. And then really just look at, if there's the ability on the package to understand how they roast it and the flavor notes. That's a great way to see, am I going to like something that tastes, may have a nuttier flavor or a chocolatey flavor. And, I think one of the things to note on the flavor profiles is if it says, like one I'm looking at right now, we have red currant, lemon, and caramel. You're not drinking and being like, oh my goodness, this is like a level of red currants. It's really the lighter notes that you're getting from the region and from the way that they were grown, and then ultimately what the roast is bringing out of it. This is the question we get asked all the time. And our answer is never probably as satisfying, but it ultimately does depend on the person and their preference. So, if I talk to Ken, he loves a percolator as his coffee maker. Wow. I have an auto drip. I love every now and then a French press. But again, it's, what's going to work for you. And, some people want something quick and easy. Some people don't mind taking a little more time to do a pour over or a French press or whatever else it is. It really is a personal preference piece. So we do actually some coffee tastings. Through COVID, we did virtual coffee tastings, and that was probably the number one question. And I'd say we probably leave people the least satisfied on that question. But the one thing we will certainly say is that we'd never recommend single cup servings as the way to brew the best coffee. We won from a sustainable processing, the waste, and also just the way that the water and the beans and the grinds at that point are blended together. We just don't believe that's the best way to have your coffee. Understand the convenience, obviously, but really, if you can find something that, whether it's an auto drip, pour over, French press, even a percolator, the big thing that's really helpful is, and a tip we use for people is, when you put your grounds into whichever device you're going to use, some machines do this automatically, especially more advanced machines now, is a process called blooming. where you pour a little bit of hot water on the beans, and it helps kind of let them bloom and start to give off the aroma and the flavor. And that's a little process that almost allows them to open up before the actual brewing happens. You tend to get it's super simple, and you tend to get a better flavor from the coffee.
And does it have to be hot water? Could it be it doesn't matter what the temperature of the water is when you do that?
I would say room temperature to warmer water
Okay.
would be best, but yeah, that would be best.
Wow. See, that's a great tip. I never would have thought of that in a million years.
Yeah. So if you've got whole bean coffee, you can stretch the shelf life. We tend to not like anything that's been sitting more than 3 months, just because you are ultimately losing the freshness, and that is such an important piece to us. Some coffees probably have a shelf life of 6 months. We wouldn't really recommend that, but they do. For storing, we always suggest some sort of airtight container, preferably if it is not clear, or if it is clear that it has a light protector glass on it. Just because anything that can impact the beans, you want to try to preserve them as much as possible. So with how they were roasted, light, air can all change that. So the more that you can do airtight, really sealed, the best. It doesn't have to be anything complicated or super expensive, but airtight and not completely clear would be great. So for us, the bags, and I have one here just as an example, we wanted something very clean and very nautical, which is really from our whole design. So that was pretty easy, just pulling from our brand colors and whatnot. But we wanted also the bag to be, usable. So we've got something you could use this as your container if you don't have a specific container at home, and just kind of tin on it. But on the label, what was really important for us was to make sure we get the right information. You're asking what's important before, and I think let's get it all right there in one place so that you can see it. The tasting notes to us are important so that you get a sense of what type of flavor you're going to get from the coffee. The roast is really important because that whether that's light, medium, or dark, we have 5 dots, kind of ranking system that we do. That's really important because people relate to that immediately to understand, am I a light person, am I a medium person, or am I a dark roast person? Which I also recommend, and start to try other things, just see what you like, because every roaster has a different interpretation as well. And then the origin we think is really important, so that you know where your beans are getting sourced from, and the roasted date. So that way you know when they were roasted, and when you get them in a few days post the roasting date, it's kind of exciting to see, wow, this was just roasted.
Right.
And it's the freshest. So that's how our bags and the label design came to be. So from just the aging, the only thing that we do for that is, as I mentioned, we'll roast the coffee. We want to give it a little time to degas, and then we will package that up and get that out to you pretty quickly. So for us, there's not a massive amount of time between that process. And then when you get it, it's up to you how you want to, or when you want to use it, really.
Got it. So the aging is more just time to it for degassing, and so that way you can,
Correct.
And that's a fairly short time.
Yeah, we'll do 1 to 2 days and we're good to go.
Got it. Okay.
Sure. We've got 9 different roasts at this point, ranging from light to dark. We also have some flavored roasts because we were getting a lot of requests, and we were dabbling with a few that are really delicious and don't provide, we're not using a syrup that you add to your coffee, so it's less sweet. It's really roasted in with the beans. And we have, for that, on that topic, we've got a sea salt caramel mocha. We have portside pumpkin, which is a huge hit with everybody who loves pumpkin, because it's not the overkill of pumpkin spice lattes.
Right.
It's really a subtle, but not too sweet, not too spicy type of flavor that you get just in a black cup of coffee. And if you want to add cream or milk, it makes a nice treat. And then we have vanilla and coconut for flavored. We then move into the roast and the blends. We've got some single origin. So we've got our Dark Horizon, which is one of our darkest roasts. That's sourced from Peru. We have our First Light, which is our Costa Rican, and our Drift Away, which is Colombian. And then we have blends that range from our Dark and Bright, which is a mix of our lightest roast, our Smooth Seas, which is the Indian Malabar Monsoon, and our darker Colombian roast blended together. We have our Springline Signature, which is definitely one of our top selling for sure. This is a little bit more on the medium to darker side, and that's a mix of Costa Rican, Colombian, and Indonesian. We have our Echo Bravo Espresso, which is honestly a delicious espresso. It produces a wonderful crema, 5-bean blend. I was mentioning before, we add a little bit of Robusta, which adds some boldness to it and just gives it a great profile. It's amazing. And, there might be a couple others in there, but those are probably some of the bigger hits that we get. And it really depends on what you like. It's kind of funny. We were the coffee sponsor for the Newport International Boat Show about a month ago. And we signed on to that a few months prior. And we were thinking, how are we going to produce this much iced coffee on site? Because normally you go through a process where you're brewing the coffee hot, you need it to cool, then you can have iced coffee. Or you can do cold brew, but that takes a long time as well. And, just the amount of space we would need, the amount of water that we would need is because water to us is very critical to the coffee brewing process. So that really we were thinking and trying to figure out what can we do. And Joe, our partner, said, what if we were to can the coffee? And we had seen some around, we had tried some. A lot of times it's cold brew that they do because that process has been easier. But we actually found this provider in Massachusetts. Their name's Elemental Brewing. And they came up with this proprietary process called snap chilling, where they brew the coffee hot and they basically flash chill it into the can at 36 degrees. And it preserves the flavor, the aroma. There's no additives, there's no oxidation, and there's no dilution. So you're truly drinking cold coffee.
Oh, wow.
And the flavor is bold, it's smooth, it is delicious. They were a huge hit. And now we've started selling them directly. It's becoming an even bigger hit because it's something you can take on the go. It's easy. You can drink it from a can. If you want to add, milk or sugar or oat milk or whatnot, you can pour it out and do that. The good news is the shelf life on these. I have them here. That's why I keep looking at them.
Perfect.
If they're kept cold, Elemental's saying about 6 to 12 months, which is a long shelf life.
A long time.
And the good news, and one of the things that was important for us, was that they don't have to remain cold chain, which means they don't have to go from being cold to staying cold in a refrigerated truck to into refrigerated storage to into your house cold. They can actually be kept room temperature for about 2 weeks or so without losing any of the body or the flavor or the aroma.
Oh, okay.
Which is very rare because most need to be kept cold to preserve that. So, as we're thinking of, as we're sending them in the mail, how do we make sure that nothing's going to get lost from a flavor profile? And that actually is helping us because once you get it, if you can't get into the fridge right away, no problem. But once you do, you can have a great cold coffee. It's called Snap Chilled. It's delicious. We have our medium roast right now, but it's pretty bold and it's great.
And now could this also be reheated?
That's probably the number one question we get. And I looked into that because I wanted to make sure and I wanted to try it. And yeah, if you pour it out of the can, put it in a mug, you could totally have it as hot coffee too.
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah.
There's so many, so you can have it chilled, you can have room temperature, you can have it hot. Either way, it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yep. I recommend it chilled. It's intended to be chilled.
Right.
So that's where I think you're going to get the best and I don't know. I'm an iced coffee guy. It's something about New England. We tend to be around as coffee drinkers. I don't know. We're gluttons for punishment for the cold, but it is really, really delicious. It is the customers, to be quite honest. And every time we get a glowing review online, or we're out and someone tries it and their eyes light up and they're, wow, this is really good. And then they tell somebody else and they're looking at somebody else like, try this. That is the moment that is just so rewarding. You know, I think as a new business, we are constantly concerned. Like, how can we make sure we're keeping our customers happy? How can we create the best experience? You know, if we ship something and something goes out wrong, that makes us, you know, that drives us crazy. But the biggest thing is making sure that we resolve it for a customer, that they love the coffee. And that is what motivates us. I will tell you, every day we're having a day where it's like, you know, you hit a grind at some point and you're like, wow, you know, like, how do we do more? And then you get that comment or that just pat on the back from someone that's like, wow, you guys have nailed this. That keeps us going. And that just makes us want to get it to more people, to have them enjoy it. And, you know, part of, I think, our excitement is that we, especially Joe and I, who run the business side, we get to bring Ken's masterpiece and masterful roasting to people. And that is exciting because Ken is a very behind the scenes type of guy. And I think it's just really exciting for us to tell him, listen to all the great feedback we're getting. And like, it motivates him. It's like this engine that just keeps running.
Right.
We just want to get it to more and create this ultimate experience for people that is beyond just the coffee. We ultimately want to create a community. And that's been what we have started to do. And that's keeps us so motivated.
That sounds great. Yeah, that we're all on the same page, you know, and that
great,
you know. So, all right. Well, I don't think I have any more questions, at least not at this point, until we geek out with Ken and coffee and do all those types of things, you know. All right. It has been such a pleasure, Rich.